your church has changed. It says rebuilding the church and mission post-COVID. That's a subhead. And
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit about what it looks like, why the church needs to rebuild? What are some of the challenges that COVID brought up? And apart from just not meeting, we're starting to meet back in some parts of the world, but the church almost does need a bit of a rebuild or a restructure because it's struggling in some places to get people back to what church used to be.
Yeah, I liken COVID to like a liminal space. You pushed out into this space suddenly, and it's difficult to gain an orientation as to where you actually are. Churches, including Adventist churches, rushed to get online, and that was really valuable. But for many, that was church, reproducing sitting in front of a preacher and sitting in front of some singers for 2 hours each week. And very quickly, people started to sense this is not all church is about. And then, of course, very quickly, people learnt that church could be done in many different ways. And so, as some pastors said to me in one of the conferences, we're having a pastors meeting by Zoom, and this was one of the conferences where they went back again fairly soon after the lockdowns, and they said, we thought we had our congregation back, or at least 60 or 65% of our congregation back, and we thought it looked pretty much the same. But it was actually like 60% of the original congregation, and everybody was like a family grieving at a different level and processing this in different ways. So the question that has been asked most frequently over the last 12 months has been, what is church?
Yes.
Where is this headed? And what might it look like? So I think we've seen some pretty major changes, and now we're already seeing some trends that are opening up some possibilities as to what we're going to be grappling with. The world has been shaken, and the church has been shaken as well. Now, you think of some of the trends that that COVID has brought about. One is that many are realizing that church is much smaller than they had imagined, and that it could be more relational. It could be much smaller and more connected in relationships. We're seeing a trend to what I would call hybrid church, and I refer to that in the book, Your Church Has Changed. I say, Pastor, you went into COVID with 1 or 2 churches, and now, lo and behold, you have 50 churches. Because you have, even if the church is coming back, you have a certain percentage of the people who've come back to sit in a physical building. But the research around the world is showing probably only 45 to 60, 65% are coming back to sit in a building. Now, we can decide that the others who don't come back are not faithful believers, because we've always judged a faithful believer as someone who sits there for 2 hours on a Sabbath morning, even if they're not connected, right? But that one is a faithful member. Now, we have a certain number who are sitting back in a building where people can return. But you think of the changes, people have to register before they can come back, or they've got to register when they come. So the open door that we always thought of for anybody to come to church is not really there in the same way. Then we have the people who prefer to be online, either watching Zoom of that church or Facebook of that particular church that is their home church, or they're online with their choice of whatever church they want to go to around the world. Then there's the people who've learnt, hey, I don't need to be on Zoom, and I don't need to go on the internet. I can actually sit and read my Bible and have the Lord's Supper in my home with some friends or with my family. My wife and I, for example, we chose in the few times that I wasn't speaking on Zoom all day Sabbath, we chose to actually read our Bibles, to sit and discuss and share, to call our neighbours who were stressed out at the time, to call our family, to visit some retired pastors to see whether they're still alive, because I said, you're amongst the vulnerable ones. Have you fallen off the planet or not? And to connect with people and encourage people. So that to us was church. And so groups are getting together, and a number of people have said they get together and read their Bibles, and they have the Lord's Supper together and that type of thing. So we've got a variety, and some choose to dip in and out of each of those. Another aspect is that church has become somewhat borderless. And so people join a Zoom church, even if their church, a Zoom Sabbath school, even if their church has gone back to meeting in the building, they still meet in Zoom Sabbath school with friends from different parts of the world even. Then they choose to go either to a physical church, or they go to a church in another state or another country to watch a sermon, and they give their tithe to another place entirely to where they live. So this is changing the dynamic of church very, very much. One pastor said he regularly went to China for a Friday evening small group, somewhere in his own state for a Sabbath school, and to a church service in the States. That was his mix that he was putting together. So we're in a hybrid kind of environment, which is very, very different to what we've had.
Yeah.
It's been a very difficult time, very painful time, and it's caused a lot of anxiety, and we grieve over the loss that many have suffered. My roommate from Avondale College has died of COVID, and he was healthy and strong, and from the time he got sick to when he died was only about 3 weeks. And
in the US, Peter, was
in the US, yes, yeah. So it's been a painful journey for many, and we extend our sympathy to many who are finding it a very anxious time. But it's also a time to reflect and say, what opportunities is God giving to us? Because faith has never been lived out or shared in convenient times. And, it's always been a tough time for believers. So we don't need to be surprised that we may face difficult times of sharing faith now.